This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. It has been 25 years since Hong Kong's handover to China. Despite the challenges, Hong Kong remains a vibrant economy and a global hub of finance, trade, and transport. Of course, it has not been all roses, and in recent years, Hong Kong went through a sticky patch. Now, as Hong Kong has the leadership of newly elected Chief Executive John Lee Kai-chiu, who else than one of Hong Kong's most prominent business personalities can help us scratch beneath the surface and understand what's at stake for the region. I'm very honored today to be joined by Annie Wu Suk Ting. Madam Wu is one of the founding members of the Hong Kong Federation of Women. She is a former member of the Standing Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Madam Wu, welcome to The Hub. So Madam Wu, there's so many things I want to get your take on, but let's start with mainland Hong Kong relations. We're marking the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China. Some people say the relationship between Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland is one of symbiotic interdependence, but others say Hong Kong is becoming more and more like a Chinese mainland city with Beijing's political interventions. How would you characterize the relations between the two sides?
Well, as someone born and brought up in Hong Kong, and I went through all from the, I would say, the colonial period up to the beginning of the Hong Kong SAR, 1st of July, 1997. I think now we are on the right track to really ensure we are working on the right steps for the one country, two systems. Because since 1997 until now, for the last 25 years, we have been not really sure. The government, the Hong Kong SAR government, the people in Hong Kong, they don't completely understand and comprehend and how to really appreciate the value of one country, two systems. So I think with the support of the central government now, and with also the national security law enacted in Hong Kong, and also the chief executive, the president chief executive and the incoming chief executive, they know exactly what is the one country, two system. I think now we are on the right track to enjoy the one country, two system benefits.
Like you said, you witnessed it all when Hong Kong was under the rule of the British, now to the handover to now, exercising the one country, two systems principle for over 25 years. Looking back, what are your proudest moments and what are the moments that, let's say, are the most upsetting for you?
The most exciting moment was when Mr. Tung Chee-hwa tried to invite me to join his team to support his candidacy to be the chief executive for Hong Kong. So I joined his team back in 1996. And then, of course, the proudest moment, not only for me and for everyone in Hong Kong, especially for my late father, was when we were attending the flag raising ceremony of our country's national flag and the Hong Kong SAR flag at the midnight, exactly midnight of 1st of July, 1997. That means when Hong Kong was really returned to the motherland. And actually, Hong Kong people are going to say, Hong Kong people govern Hong Kong. And this is very important for us. We are no longer under the colonial rule. We are our own masters.
So what about the most upsetting one?
Quite disappointing was back in 2019 when we have all these riots and all the young people were completely mesmerized, or I would use the word brainwashed, by the social media, that they were destroying the society of Hong Kong, destroying the stability and affected the prosperity of Hong Kong. And I felt that was the time when really we have to really try to provide the right source of information and how we can approach our young people in Hong Kong to really let them appreciate, understand that they are enjoying so much in the one country, two system for Hong Kong.
So Madam Wu, in 2019, you denounced a group of people who eventually turned violent during the protests at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, and you said the views of a small group of radical protesters do not represent the view of all 7.5 million Hong Kongers. How do you explain the views of the majority heard in the West? How do you explain this reality?
Hong Kong Chinese are very timid and very scared. They don't want to voice their opinion because they're scared that people will pounce on them and criticize them. They rather want to do very quietly and go around to make some money and care about their jobs. And of course, you have lived for 8 years over in the West. The Western media is very strong, and they are all, they are all gang up to criticize and also to provide a lot of false information about Hong Kong. And anyone outside of Hong Kong can understand this. The Hong Kong government is really very suppressive, and the Hong Kong people are suffering, and the young people are doing something right to justify. And then how can you imagine a city where the young students who hold the American flag, the British flag, to say we want to go back to become a colonial place, and they want to go to USA. And if these countries are not sending the people to infiltrate the students, I don't think these students will be so pro-Western or pro-USA or pro-UK. This is really I would say, very obnoxious act. So, and also Western media, that they send all their information to Hong Kong with distorted information and news. So, of course, with the news from Hong Kong, most of our news in Hong Kong are in Chinese, in Cantonese. So the Western media will not pick it up.
We know that Beijing has passed a national security law for Hong Kong and also made requirements that only patriots can run for elected offices in Hong Kong. How do you think those legislations have impacted what's happening in Hong Kong?
This is a very necessary act, because if you look back at Singapore, the day that Singapore became independent, only patriots can try to set up the Republic of Singapore, right? And nowadays, civil servants in Singapore, if they are not patriots, I don't think they can serve in the government. But back in 1997, 1st of July in Hong Kong, because the central government said we'll allow Hong Kong people to govern Hong Kong. I personally feel the central government expect all Hong Kong Chinese are patriots. So they expected to give us a free hand and let the chief executive and the SAR government to run what they want to do for the betterment of Hong Kong. But the last 25 years show that in Hong Kong, we have not trained the young students about patriotism. And it's very important that we have to draw the line that if you are not a patriot, if you don't love your country, if you don't love Hong Kong, why should you be a civil servant? And I think I support the idea to get the civil servant to have the examination on basic law, because basic law is the rule of law for Hong Kong. And even if a civil servant does not know the rule of law for Hong Kong, how can the civil servant serve Hong Kong properly and decently?
Right. We know that there are a whole lot of grievances that the young people in Hong Kong have towards the government, and the newly elected chief executive, John Lee Kai-shuu, said this month that Hong Kong would pay greater attention to issues such as youth employment, housing, social inequalities. What measures would you say is the most appropriate to bring hope and confidence back among the Hong Kong youth at this point?
In Hong Kong, we have a lot of different types of young people. Some young people are very hardworking. I think they to be given a lot of support and opportunities. So I would look at to see how we can open more doors for the grassroots young people, because they are the mass majority. They need our support to give them more opportunity to work, to have enjoyed better jobs, and to work in Hong Kong and also in the Greater Bay Area. The middle class, we have a lot of young people who are quite well off, and the parents prefer that they don't work too hard and they can support them and enjoy and pick and choose the jobs. I noticed some of my friends, they ask them, the children say, don't work too hard. Well, if not, we can still support you. Of course, the upper class and the wealthy people, we are not really trying to think about how we can open doors for them. So if I look at the opportunities and the problems in Hong Kong, is how we can support the grassroots level people, how we can give more opportunities to young people who are from that area, who are hardworking, but they don't have a ability to open the doors. So in Hong Kong, we have 18 districts. If the chief executive can go to this 18 districts and ask the district councillor to really look at how they can support certain young people who are graduating or who are not yet graduated but need more support, then I think we are going to really hit the nail on the head. It's not just saying everyone should be supported, everyone should be open the doors. I think if I were in Hong Kong serving the government, I would say, look at the grassroots level, the young people first. That's my priority.
All right. Talking about the Greater Bay Area that you briefly mentioned, how do you see that initiative in helping Hong Kong youth and young professionals in Hong Kong in terms of career and life opportunities?
It's a very big area for young Hong Kong people who wants to challenge themselves to jump across, to start from scratch in the Greater Bay Area. But unfortunately, for the last 20 years, the comfort zone of Hong Kong is so attractive that the young people prefer to enjoy life in Hong Kong, don't work too hard, but still have their friends around. So that's the attitude of a lot of young people we saw in Hong Kong. And they're scared that if they go to Greater Bay Area, they would be challenged, they would be not as competitive as in Hong Kong. But I also have seen a small group of young people from Hong Kong who actually have started from scratch in the Greater Bay Area, and now they're enjoying because they find out sky is not the limit for them. So it's very important that we have two types of young people. One type that wants to meet the challenges and have the carve a new way for themselves, a new path. Some of those who say you will push them along, encourage them, they still want to stay back in Hong Kong and not to do too much. So opportunities are for those who want to take chances. And Hong Kong, we always have a freedom of choice. We can't push people around, but we can give them more chances that people who wanted to go over there, we can give them more support services through Hong Kong. And when they are there for the first year or so, to find out what jobs or what professions they are in, then we can help one by one. It's not just supporting tens or thousands. I don't believe in numbers. I believe in quality.
During the 1997 handover ceremony, Beijing guaranteed that Hong Kong's economic and political systems will remain unchanged for 50 years. We're halfway through that mark. In light of the recent events in Hong Kong, the events between the Hong Kong and the Chinese mainland, and also the geopolitical events happening around the world, how do you foresee what's happening in the next 25 years?
As someone living in Hong Kong, I think the next 25 years, life in Hong Kong will be very stable and also a lot of opportunities because we understand and fully appreciate central government has given so much to Hong Kong. I feel some of the cities in the mainland are going to be very jealous of Hong Kong getting so much benefits from the central government. You know, look at the waters, look at the supply of foodstuffs, the vegetables, the poultry, everything from mainland China. So actually, mainland China is the lifeline for Hong Kong's prosperity and stability. This will go on, and I think will go beyond 2047. This is my personal vision, all right? On the other hand, I think Hong Kong people, the young people in Hong Kong should really open up their eyes and think beyond the area, the boundary of Hong Kong. So this is something that our central government, together with us, SAR government in Hong Kong, should really open up their eyes, give them more chances to travel beyond Hong Kong, to go to different villages, to go to different provinces, to see for themselves. And I personally feel with the young people, their experience and they're willing to try hard beyond any courses in the mainland, the country will progress very quickly. And with the support of the central government, it's going to be a much more green country. I use the word green country, talking about healthcare and also benefits to the average person, livelihood and green mountains and I would say clean waters. So sometimes Hong Kong, we have to learn from what is happening in the mainland. Hong Kong, we should really treasure our position and we should really more improve on our knowledge and of English and approach and resource to be well connected with the whole world beyond our country.
Madam Wu, thank you for your service and your insights and perspectives that's been shared with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hong Kong's Generation Z is known for its energy. Some of the Generation Z friends also turn their attention to the tremendous opportunities the Chinese mainland has to offer. And they say they want to build bridges between the Hong Kong SAR and the Chinese mainland. That's what Key Bros do. Those two Hong Kong internet influencers are making a splash on YouTube. Welcome to the hub, Key Bros. Great to have you with us. Let's start by talking about Hong Kong, a place that is very dear to my heart. It's been 25 years since Hong Kong's handover to China. Perhaps you guys can start by telling us a little bit about your own reflections, your own experiences in how you see the changes in Hong Kong in the past 2 decades.
Well, I think Hong Kong has come a long way since 1997. Nowadays, we are a SCR China. We have, I think, a very bright future ahead. Obviously, there were many obstacles in the past few years, especially like in 2019, 2040, there were major social upheavals. But every time I think that Hong Kong people have shown resilience, there's always people who want to leave with negative feelings about the city. They're free to leave, but equally also many positive vibes in the city. People who want to stay will stay. People have always said that, oh, Hong Kong will fail, like in 1997. But every time we've as Hong Kong people, we've proven to the outside
You talk
world
about
that
positive vibes. Do you think the vibes are still as positive now, after all these years, after all that has happened in 2019 and 2020? Before I turn to the other brother, do you think the vibes are still as positive?
I feel like the 25th anniversary in some ways is a parallel to the 1997 Hanover, because we can sort of say that the Hanover was a formality. It was a formal return to Chinese sovereignty. But I feel like in the past year, we can see that this is kind of like a substantial return, a more substantial reform in the Hong Kong system, not just in terms of politics, but also in terms of people's sense of belonging towards China. And I feel like a lot of people seeing that this is sort of like a return to stability, a return to a more normal lifestyle since the social upheaval and the rest of the past few years. I feel like it has given people a renewed sense of optimism in Hong Kong's future. And as young people, we also feel very optimistic that the next 25 years will be even brighter than the last 25 years. So we hope that Hong Kong can continue to go in a positive direction once seeing how things have returned to normal over the past year.
Exactly.
You guys are major influencers hailing from the Hong Kong SAR. You guys started on YouTube a channel in June 2020. The name of your show is very interesting. It's called Soft Talk. I actually also like the opening intro where you said, "Welcome to Soft Talk," where unlike BBC's Hard Talk, the interviewees won't find it hard to talk. Why did you come up with that line?
Well, I think we just wanted to provide an alternative perspective to mainstream Western media, because we did study in the UK, and we find that many of the opinions are very one-sided. And there's not enough opinions from people outside of the Western world, from like developing countries, maybe, China as a whole. It's very underrepresented overall. And that's why we wanted to provide a more alternative perspective to the BBC, for example.
The other brother, go ahead.
I think another reason why we're called Soft Talk is because I feel like the Western media and Western people to some extent hold a very critical view of alternative perspectives. We always hear of the Western countries talk about universal values, and I actually think that they hold a very Eurocentric idea and very Eurocentric ideals. And I think the reason why we call this Soft Talk is just to have a contrast with BBC's imposing and critical attitude towards alternative perspectives. So I guess that also explains the nature of our channel, which is that we're here to build a bridge between the West and the East, to have a melting pot of different ideas and different values, in the same way that Hong Kong is really.
I want to talk about some specific issues, such as the younger generation in Hong Kong. I really want to understand, and maybe for that matter, help our audience from around the world understand the mentality of the younger generation in Hong Kong, because after all, they did make up the bulk of the protesters during the 2019 protests. If you look at some surveys, that says some 70–80% of the protesters were aged, under 30. Can both of you give us a sense of how youngsters in Hong Kong have coped with the realities of their society in the past 2 years or so? Have they moved on?
I think some of them have. I won't say all of them. Some of them have indeed moved on. Unfortunately, a small sector of them have continued their ways in being extreme. This, I think, stems from the old education system that's based on the colonial mindsets. Especially, there was one subject called liberal studies, which is already discontinued in Hong Kong, where it's supposedly liberal, but in fact, it doesn't encourage critical thinking. It only encourages sort of brainwashing towards the kids since a very young age from mainly Western media sources. But they don't provide a holistic picture on maybe colonial history or world history even. And that has caused people to only believe in one particular perspective. And I think the problem is that when people blindly follow slogans, it doesn't actually bring justice, but actually brings more chaos.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of young people, including ourselves, once you exit university, I feel like the education system, in some ways, it's kind of like a bubble. When you're still in school, you think of things in a very idealistic way, because you have time on your hands to think in a very academic way, right? You have time on your hands to think about idealistic things, such as democracy, freedom. What does it mean? Why don't I have these rights? Why don't I get to vote? Stuff like that. But once you enter real life, once you enter real society, you start to think in very pragmatic terms. You start to think about, well, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to carry my life forward? How am I going to improve my standard of living? And I feel like a lot of people are starting to realize that life is really more than just politics. Life is more than idealistic thinking. And in many ways, people are starting to understand that economically speaking, the mainland has a very important role to play in Hong Kong society. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that without that inherent connection between the mainland and Hong Kong really cannot succeed on its own. So I think a lot of young people, hopefully with schemes such as the Greater Bay Area, the government is providing training schemes, providing subsidies for young people to come to go to the Greater Bay Area and work there and find a job, find new opportunities. I think more and more people are starting to embrace that and understand that, well, ideals are one thing, but ultimately, the most important thing for governments to do is to ensure that citizens live a good life and to ensure that they have the ability and the opportunity to better themselves.
Upon that idea, I want to ask you about the education in Hong Kong. On one hand, you do need academic freedom, right? You want young people, kids, to think open-mindedly about things, to think critically about things, to ask intelligent questions. But on the other hand, you don't want every person in a society to embrace anarchy, for example, or radical ideas, or expressing those ideas in a radical manner. How do you think Hong Kong's universities and educational institutions have fared in that regard, especially in recent years?
Well, because of Hong Kong's historical development and economic prosperity in the past few decades, a lot of Hong Kong's best and brightest students get to travel overseas and study in different countries. For example, I think in the UK, there are currently like around, 10,000 Hong Kong youngsters studying in the UK. In America, it's like 5,000 or so, just in the universities. And I think for these people, they get a lot of exposure to alternative perspectives because they get to travel abroad, they get to speak to people from different places. They also get to understand what life really is in the West. And they start to realize, as we have done through our experiences in the West, that the West is not really a paradise. And I think a lot of people in local universities, they don't get to have the same exposure. So in some ways, I can't really fault them for believing in idealistic thinking because all of the impression that they get from the West are from Hollywood or from the Western mainstream media. So I think in local universities, you do tend to see a much more uniformed or even radicalized idea of what the West is and what China is, because at the same time, they refuse to travel to the mainland because they have these unreasonable fears. So I feel like the most important thing that we have to do is really to provide them an opportunity to travel, an opportunity to access different types of media. And I think language also plays a part. A lot of people might feel like Hong Kong youngsters speak good English and all of them.
Us Hong Kong youngsters Mandarin during these days. I first went to Hong Kong in 2004. And to be honest, I was looking for a hair gel. And then that shopping assistant couldn't understand my Mandarin. She couldn't understand my English. And we ended up not being able to communicate with each other.
So I think a lot of Hong Kong people are living in their own bubble, so to speak. And in local universities, they only talk to people that they agree with. So I think it's actually very much anti-democratic. If you really care about critical thinking, freedom of speech, then you should really exercise your rights in a reasonable way instead of abusing it to impose violence and impose your own ideas on people that might disagree with you.
Yeah, I'll just add that in the past, there was unfettered academic freedom. I think nowadays there's more of like a good balance that's being maintained, especially in regards to like preserving like national sovereignty, territorial integrity, but also preserving academic freedom. I think they don't actually conflict with each other. They can mutually coexist. And that, I think, is the path that's going forward in Hong Kong, which I hope it will continue rather than purely emphasizing on academic freedom without actually knowing what it means.
And then do you think social media somehow exacerbated the situation where people feel they're entitled to their own opinions, whereby they're boxing themselves into things, views they already believe in?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think social media has played a big role in the social upheavals in the past, in inciting and igniting public hatred, opinions, polarizing opinions. It's also a big way for the major powers behind, maybe like certain Western countries, agendas to manipulate public opinion and control these people to serve their own purposes rather than for the benefits of the people of Hong Kong. So I think many people are actually blinded by these hidden agendas in the past few years. And thankfully, some of them have started to waken up to the fact that there is a lot of foreign interference in Hong Kong that's not necessarily productive to our society.
Mm-hmm.
One last question. We're running out of time. Going forward, how do you think the youth on the Chinese mainland and those in the Hong Kong SAR can foster greater understanding of each other, the nuances of each other?
The most important thing is communication. Really try to talk to more people from maybe mainland, more people from Hong Kong and vice versa, to understand more perspectives. And also, I think maybe have like a very constructive dialogue, debates that can help. Travel to each other's places, maybe after the pandemic is over, will help in building greater understanding. And also, I would encourage, especially people in Hong Kong, to kind of give up their prejudices and try to understand the different perspective, and maybe use opportunities such as like the Greater Bay Area to explore the mainland. So that way, both sides can understand each other better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like given that Hong Kong has returned to stability, I hope that once the pandemic is over, there can be more dialogue between the mainland and Hong Kong. I feel like it's a two-way street, right? I think while Hong Kong people should definitely give up their prejudices, I think also for example, someone posted a video, one of our videos on Bilibili, a mainland channel, and we actually received a lot of negative comments. A lot of people thought that we were pretending to be patriotic. A lot of people accused us of being pretentious because we spoke English instead of Mandarin. And they were like, "Well, you're Chinese. Why don't you speak Chinese?" But I think it really tells us that miscommunication really goes both ways. A lot of people in the mainland, they see the media, they think all Hong Kong youngsters are just bad people. They're all rioters, they're all protesters, they're all brainwashed by democracy. A lot of Hong Kong people feel like, well, all mainlanders are just uncivilized tourists that come to Hong Kong and they do improper stuff. So I feel like with more travel, with more dialogue, with more open-mindedness, that can definitely change. Education also plays a role. So I actually have a pretty optimistic feeling about the future relationship between the mainland and Hong Kong, simply because, well, we have to work with each other. Hong Kong's economy relies on the mainland. The mainland also relies on Hong Kong as an interchange of capital. A lot of mainland companies are listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. 75% of capital on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange are made up from mainland companies. So I feel like this communication has to happen, and I believe it will occur slowly across time. And we just have to maintain an open mind and be tolerant towards each other's cultural differences.
Key Bros, so good to talk with you. Come back again. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
That will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. I'll see you again soon.